Recently I made this new desert ironwood mallet, and I can't wait to use it, but these chisels have seen better days, and I think I should probably restore and sharpen them before using the mallet on them.
Now, I also don't like these orange handles. They're fine, they're comfortable, they work alright, but I don't like the fact that it's got a big metal cap on the top. They don't look very good, and I'd quite like to make some wooden ones.
The first thing I want to do is get these orange rubbery plastic handles off, which turned out to be surprisingly easy. Now, I'm probably being a bit of a tool snob not liking these, and they'll likely outlast whatever handles I end up making, but I'm hopeful that whatever I do end up making will at least look and feel better.
The next step is going to be using some evaporust to get the rust off, because it's easier than scrubbing them.
I've used evaporust a few times before, and it's super effective at getting rid of surface rust. You just pop all of your rusty bits into a container of some kind, top them up with evaporust, and soak them overnight. The next day you can give them a rinse and they'll be ready for the next stage, which in this case is polishing with a maroon pad. Now there are many methods you could use for this, from sandpaper to steel wool. And I actually did use sandpaper for a few areas where there were heavy machine marks from when these chisels were manufactured. I don't think these machine marks will affect the chisels functionally though, so I'm not going to worry about removing them completely. I also removed some sharp corners from areas that just didn't need to be sharp. Alright, before sharpening the bits that need to be sharp, I'm going to make some new handles. And for this I'm using yet another offcut from some oak sleepers I used in the garden last year. Most of my recent projects have been made using offcuts, and they're a fantastic resource for smaller projects like this, so don't throw those smaller pieces away. Some of the last few projects I've made have been using offcuts, which you can check out over on my channel. And if you want to see more projects like this in the future, please consider subscribing, because now that I've restored and made all of these tools, I'm excited to start using them on some projects. Okay, back to the handles. So far, I've been cutting a bunch of smaller blocks or blanks, which I'll then square up before shaping them into the handles. Before squaring them up though, I make sure to give the hand plane a good sharpen to cope with some of the tricky grain in these bits of oak. Working with sharp hand tools is essential, as it allows you to work efficiently and accurately. And it's fun.
Now, as I plane this, I'm checking a couple of things. One is that I'm planing to a specific thickness, which I've got set here with the set square. I can just hold that up to the piece of wood and just check very quickly if it's meeting a consistent thickness everywhere. And this one is getting pretty close. The other thing that I can check is whether I'm planing square. So I want this piece to be nice and square, or have right angles on all of the sides, and that's just going to help me get things accurate as I move on to the next steps. So regularly stopping and checking everything's the right thickness and is square is a must, and now that I've got this set, I can use it on all of the other pieces.
I continued to work on all the handle blocks, and before long I had 8 smooth and precise-ish handles. Now, this stage was a really good point to drill out the holes where the tang will fit. Having the square edges and corners to reference from, I can be fairly accurate with where I'm drilling. Then I just need to try my best to drill as plumb and level as possible, so as not to end up with a bunch of wonky handles. I probably could have created some kind of jig to help me do this, but I decided to be bold and just go for it. It's not like I'm doing surgery, and if it's a little wonky, well, I can just make another. Then I marked a circle on top with a cut-off piece of steel pipe which I'll be using as a ferrule, which slots over the end of the chisel handle where the tang goes to stop it from splitting. Next, I want to make these handles a bit more round, and here I'm marking 1/4 of the thickness of the block in on each side. Then, when I turn the piece in the vise and plane down on the corner to those lines, I'll end up with a near perfect octagonal piece, which I'll then be able to refine further into a cylinder. I've said this before, but doing processes like this by hand is pretty therapeutic and relaxing, and is a good chance to listen to audiobooks or music. Or find a nice warm spot in the sun for a nap like Winnie. Well, while she sleeps, I'll keep working, and at this stage it's time to pare down to the circle I marked with a piece of pipe previously. And I'm cutting in part way with the saw all the way around using this little jig. Then I can use a temporarily sharpened chisel to cut off the waste. And this doesn't have to be super neat because once the pipe gets hammered on, it'll cover up any rough bits. A bit of tidying up with the file and it's time to start shaping the handle further. I kept things simple here and made a mark about 30mm up from the ferrule and then used a spoke shave to taper the handle down. You can see I used a piece of tape to try and protect the ferrule a bit, but the spoke shave just ended up knocking it straight off anyway. At this stage I'm not as concerned about accuracy as I was with the earlier stages, as everything that needed to be straight or square already is. Now it's just about smoothing things into a comfortable shape to hold. After the spoke shave, a bit of sandpaper smooths out any tool marks and helps blend the transition from the wood to the steel. I also used a Shinto rasp to round over the end of the hand. At this stage I was pretty happy that I could install the chisel handle onto the blade, and I was pleased to see it was a nice tight fit. And the handle didn't split, which would have been very frustrating.
Well, that is one chisel almost complete, apart from sharpening and final sanding and everything. But I think it's looking pretty good so far. It's not perfectly straight. The chisel blade is a little bit off center in the handle, but working without drill presses and things like that, it's very tricky to get it absolutely bob on. At the moment, because of the way I made it, it's currently got this faceted octagonal look to it, which I can't decide if that's pretty cool or if it makes it look a bit like a screwdriver. So I'm going to move on to the others and then decide what to do about this later.
Because I'd already done one handle, it made working on the others much easier, as I'd already figured out the process, and I could do the rest almost on autopilot. And with spring approaching and the temperature rising, it made being out in the workshop that much nicer. In the end, I decided to smooth out the handles completely, as I thought they looked better and less like screwdrivers this way, and they'll be more comfortable to use and hold.
Alright, so that's all of the chisel handles made and sanded. They're not all perfect, and they're not all exactly the same, but I think they look way better than before, and they feel way better than before. So the next thing I need to do is sort out the edges. They're pretty rough and pretty beaten up on some of these.
For sharpening, I have a simple set of faithful diamond plates, and because of how badly some of these chisels were damaged, I did switch to some 60 grit sandpaper to get things started. Once I'd established a fresh bevel, I made sure to flatten the back before continuing. I did consider buying some new diamond plates and a nicer honing guide, and while they certainly would have helped, I should be able to get good results using a bit of patience and practice with what I have. Rather than buying shiny new things, use what you've got. I worked my way up to the finest stone and then gave each blade a good strop and tested them for sharpness. And after enjoying that, I gave each handle a little bit of oil. And they're done, ready to be used on some projects. And I think they look pretty good. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to see what I make using these chisels, as well as all of the other tools I've restored, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.